Hello do-it-yourselfers, Terry Peterman here, the Internet Electrician, and welcome to another one of my video shorts on current topics at electrical-online.com and of course right here on YouTube. In this video I'm going to replace this commercial style ceiling fan with a Downrod that's in my living room here in Costa Rica. Now the house here took a bit of a lightning strike here last summer, took out a few things, some LED lights, and of course this ceiling fan was one of the things I noticed affected by it. All the rest of the fans are similar or equal in this house, but this one at full speed runs about a half or a third of the full speed of the other fans. So I know something got damaged in that, could be just a capacitor, but nonetheless, we need a lot of air movement here in this space because this area isn't air conditioned and the 3 bedrooms are. However, we need some air movement then so people can open up both ends of the house and enjoy the tropical breezes here, but you need some air movement because it gets awful hot here in Costa Rica. So let's take this old one down and we'll go step by step on installing a new ceiling fan with a Downrod. And here's the ceiling fan we're going to install here. It's a 60-inch Boreas from Westinghouse industrial fan. Picked this up locally here in Costa Rica for what I thought was a pretty good price, around $127 US. And here's that Downrod on its own. It had to be purchased separately. It's a 1 meter long Downrod. Unfortunately, it only came in brown, so I had to spray paint it white. And this should perform the function that I need perfectly to get me down below the vault here and away from any of the wood ceiling. And as usual, first things first, we're going to shut off this circuit. And I'm going to set up my ladder and take down the old fan. So while we're on the subject of safety, I've got an issue here where one ladder, my tallest ladder in the step ladder formation, is a little too short. I'd have to be on the second to the last step to reach a fan. So I've got one that's a little bit shorter, but it's in the extension ladder formation. And so I'm going to be able to safely get up there and work on this fan, bringing this one down and mounting the new one from my extension ladder on the shorter one here. So we're going to go through this process step by step. As I mentioned, it's a Westinghouse 60-inch industrial fan. It's the Boreas model. It's model number 72743. I'll include all that in the description below and where you can purchase that. Now, this fan has several mounting options. One is with the regular Downrod. The other is with an extended Downrod. And then there is an outdoor mounting option as well that we won't be concerned with here. So we are going to focus a lot on the extension rod, and that's right here beside us and that part of the installation, but nonetheless we're going through this step by step. And step 1 says shut off the breaker and then make sure that all the parts are included. So you want to unpack it all as I've done here, spread it out and ensure that all your parts are here. Step 2 says use a metal outlet box suitable for fan support. It must support at least 35 pounds. So I know that my box is suitably mounted to support a ceiling fan, and how do I know that? That's because I did it myself and I followed all the code rules regarding installing a ceiling fan. So that box that I have in the ceiling here is firmly mounted to the structure of the ceiling with good solid wood screws, and it's a fan box that's rated for a ceiling fan. So that allows us to move on to step 3, mounting bracket installation for the indoor fan. So step 3 in the process was all about removing this canopy from this bracket. Well, this one was shipped with them not together. This was in a separate bag. So what I had to do is just take off the ground tag here that was screwed onto the side, the bonding jumper that goes to the ground system. Pull out this little rod here and then slide the mounting bracket off and the canopy. And that's pretty much all there was to step 3, was just disassembling this, which most of it was. On to step 4. And looking at step 4 here, it's all about an outdoor use for this fan and mounting both the JN hook and the secondary support hook. So we move on to step 5. Okay, so going to step 5, it's all about mounting options. So we got to jump right down to the bottom there where it says extended downrod options. So if we're installing a longer downrod than supplied, we've got to proceed to page 13, step 10 for an indoor fan. So jumping to page 13, step 10, before you replace the extension downrod, you have to dismantle the ball and downrod assembly first, which I did. So now we have to go on to the step where we replace the downrod with the extended downrod. So I've removed the canopy and the ball and the pin, everything that goes with that. Now we have to get at the bottom portion of the downrod so that we can replace it with the longer one. Just a set screw there that you need to remove. Slide that off. Now you've got access to the bottom. And if you're tall mechanical, you're going to see how this comes apart. You've got a set screw there with a jam nut, and you've got a bolt with a retaining lock key on it here, cotter key, just so that nut doesn't back off. So we've got to remove that bolt, remove this set screw, and replace this rod with this longer extension. So I've got to straighten that cotter pin out. Pull that out. Putting all the parts aside here in a piece of the plastic bubble wrap so I don't lose them. Remove this nut. We've got a nut lock washer and a flat washer. Remove this little set screw. And slide off the old downrod. Now they provided me with extension wires that'll go into the new longer downrod, so I'm going to thread those through it and then reassemble. All right, now I want you to look closely at this. The old downrod only had a white and a black going through it. So we are going to replace that white and black with our longer wires. Now they have no ground connection down here, no ground wire connection. But they achieve that through this jumper that was tagged on to the top of the ground rod at the canopy where we're going to connect to our system ground. So that should suffice because we've got good metal contact here with the brass metal that attaches to the body of the fan, and we're going to just scrape the paint off on the longer downrod just so we're sure we get a nice good mechanical connection here with all the metal parts. And then at the top, like I said, with that ground wire tagged off of there and the ground wire on the canopy itself, and both those will be attached to the system ground, we should have a sufficient ground. And that's the way the manufacturer designed it, because otherwise they would have included another third wire to go all the way up through the downrod. So let's put this back together. I've got to cut this and splice in our new longer wires. You see the neutral is tagged on here to a yellow and a white at the fan motor itself, and the black is connected to two other blacks. So I need to cut those, and we've got to put our longer wires on to go up through the downrod, the longer downrod. So here I am replacing my white neutral with a longer white wire. I cut those and stripped them. Stranded wires, so strip them together or twist them together nicely. Make sure the ends are even. And then using the appropriately sized wire nut, twist that on. Snug it up nice and tight, and then pull on all three. Tug test to make sure they're all firmly in the connector, and repeat that process for the black. So there was two blacks tied to a black. What they sent me was a blue, so we'll use blue for our hot wire, 120 volt. Straighten all those out. Line up the ends evenly. Twist them together. Spin on our wire nut. Nice and tight, and again, pull individually on all three and make sure they're snugly into the connector. Now we'll feed these up through the downrod and reassemble. So just to show you, to achieve the bonding of all the metal parts here, I've scraped the paint away. This was a brown, painted brown, probably powder coated Downrod, and then I painted it white. So I scraped all the paint off so we got down to bare metal, so that when I tighten that nut and the flat washer and lock washer onto here, I'm going to get a nice firm earthing or bonding to the ground for all the metal parts of this fan. Okay, so now along with the safety cable, I'm going to feed my 2 new wires, hot, neutral, and the safety cable up through the Downrod and reassemble. Okay, so I've assembled the Downrod, run the wires up through the pipe. As you can see, I got this bolt back in place, flat washer, lock washer, and also that set screw tightened down. And as you can see, I scraped the paint off to get a good ground connection to all the metal fan parts. And at the other end, I've got the wires coming out of the new extended Downrod, and you can see I've got the safety cable and the blue hot and the white neutral. All right, so next step then is to slide the canopy housing back over the Downrod and down to cover the motor and the connections. So we slide that down, being careful not to scratch my paint off my Downrod. So no matter how much you plan and try not to make a scratch in your newly painted Downrod, as you can see I did, so I'm going to have to touch that up after I'm done. As soon as that canopy got down close to the motor, that motor cover, Downrod must be a little bit out of round, and the edge of the hole for this set screw kind of ripped a big gouge out of my paint job. So I'll just touch that up, no big deal. Tighten this set screw. Now we'll reassemble the mounting ball, and then we'll go put that bracket up on the ceiling. Okay, now we have to assemble the upper end of the new extension rod. So do not forget to put the canopy back on over top of the rod, or you'll be undoing what all you just did here. So make sure that's slid down over the rod first, let it drop to the bottom. All right, and then we'll put back the hanger ball, put it back on. So it slides again over top of the wires. Now you need this little brass rod, and it slides through this hole here. And now you make sure you line it up in the hanger ball where it needs to be. And you're left with this hole here. It's a set screw to hold this hanger ball in place properly, but it also now is going to have to perform another function here, because there isn't a third hole, or a second hole I should say, to put our ground strap on. So I'm going to use that for both purposes. I'm going to slide that ring down into that hole. I've scraped the paint off there, as you can see, to get a good connection, and then slide that up, and I'll put this screw in place. Like I say, the other Downrod had a second threaded hole to perform this function, but we're just going to dual function that. And snugly tighten that into place. And there, we've got our ground, our hot, our neutral, and our hanger cable, safety cable. And here's a nice close-up of how I use that set screw for dual purposes. Shove that ring terminal for the ground wire down in there between, tighten that up firmly, and you can see the retaining rod through here, and then my 3 wires ready to connect to the box. So we will go put up this mounting bracket, fasten it to the box. That was actually back on step 3, but it doesn't really matter when you do that. You just have to do it prior to hanging the fan and making your connections. So you want to mount this bracket on the upslope a bit here, so that the hanging ball hooks in from the top, and then gravity will swing it down to a level position. So now I'm going to put in my box screws. These are good heavy box screws, and as I mentioned before, this is a rated ceiling fan box. Got it mounted right to the ceiling structure. So we'll put that screw in. Get the other one started here. And make sure you got your bracket centered over the box screws. These have long slots, so they'll fit any size mounting screws you would have on these boxes. So just make sure it's centered over the box. And I like to just check to see how firmly that bracket's in place by pulling on it as hard as I can, and nothing even moves or gives here whatsoever. And I'm, well, 180 pounds on a good day, maybe closer to 190. Anyhow, that bracket is nice and firmly mounted. Now we'll bring our fan up, hang it with the ball hanger, and make our connections. Now, one important step not to forget is something to hang your safety cable from. Now, this is the type of hook they provided with this fan. Of course, I have one up in there from the previous fan that was in place. So that hook that I put in is firmly screwed through the back of the plastic box and right into the structure that is the ceiling. So don't forget your safety hook to hook that safety cable to. Okay, so I'm up in place here. I've got the 3 connections to make: the ground, the neutral, and the hot. This outlet box is wired for a ceiling fan, but of course with an industrial fan application like this, it's not necessary, but somebody down the road may decide to put in a ceiling fan with a light here. Okay, so first connect my ground wires. Remember the one that was attached to the canopy, along with the one that I tagged off of the Downrod to provide a metal equipment ground to everything, to my supply ground wire out of the cable coming in. Again, line up the ends, twist your wire nut on nice and firmly, and then pull on all 3. Make sure they're all firmly in the splice. So there's my ground. Next, my neutral. Don't have a whole lot of wire to work with here. The 3 cables they provided for that downrod extension were just long enough for a meter extension here. Try to work behind it so you can see what I'm doing, but basically I've got 1 neutral coming into this box and the 1 neutral going down here to the fan. Again, lining up the ends. It's hard to work with my hands in front of my face. Line up the ends, spin that wire nut on. You'll know when you got a firm bite. If it feels kind of soft as you're tightening it, you know that only one of the conductors is working its way into the wire nut, and it's not going to be a good splice. But if it firms up, again, tug test on both white wires. Got a good connection there. Now the black. Black to the blue. Both acceptable colors for hot wires. Spin that moret on. Again, make a good connection. Tight, tug test, all good. Now I want to tuck these wires up into here. Make sure nothing's going to be pinched. And I'll slide my canopy back up and put the screws in place. All right, so now that I've got my wires safely tucked out of the way, another thing to check is make sure that your ceiling fan is hanging and can swing to a perfectly perpendicular to the ground position, and it's not going to be not wanting to hang level here. So I've got it so it swings freely and should be okay. Now I need to get the screws for the canopy and put my canopy in place. All right, so sliding the canopy back up in place. Two of the holes are fitted with slots so that you can have the screw in place. And then you can put the canopy up and give it a bit of a turn into place. And it'll hold it there while you tighten that nut, or that bolt. Machine screw, I guess, proper word. And now before you tighten those down firmly, it's a good time to make sure your other hole's lined up. There's 4 of these canopy screws to hold the canopy on. All right, so after a bit of a struggle, due to the position of that box and having to be on that extension ladder, I finally got those 4 screws in place. Not without a few bad words. Well, 2 of them, one of them repeated several times. But the canopy's up in place. Now it's time to put on the fan blades. There you see one blade I've got mounted loosely here for now. Here is the bracket up close. And they also are marked this side up. Well, it's kind of obvious. The bolts for the blades on the half of the bracket are on the other side here. So now you put these provided machine screws with a flat washer and a lock washer. And they are a Phillips or a hex head. So they go through the blade, the bracket on top, and down into the holes that are provided up there. Now, there's something that I like to do. It helps a lot in balancing a ceiling fan. Mount these and do not tighten these bolts firmly at first. Just kind of get them snug. And then what you want to do is you want to get that fan going after we put in the fan control here. You want to get it going. You want to make sure they're snug enough that the blades aren't going to come off. But what you want to do is when you spin this fan, if they're not quite tight, sometimes it'll help to align the blades and balance the fan. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just get it mounted, tighten them down snugly, but not all the way, just enough that they're not going to back off. Then we'll give it a spin, see how it is for wobble, and then we'll finish tightening those bolts down. Okay, so here's a nice tight shot of the outlet box for the fan control. I've removed the old one, and you can see here we've got the neutral splice, and they're just moretted together and sent on through. We have got the hot wire from the 2-wire coming in. That's this black wire here. And then we've got the black wire going out to the ceiling fan to power the fan. And then here is that red wire that's up there for a future ceiling fan. So it's just capped off and tucked into the back of the box. We've got to connect our new control that came with the fan. It's Westinghouse 4-speed fan control. Simple connections here. Ground goes to our ground wire, as you see back in here in the box. And our 2 hot wires, line and load, coming in. Matters not which is which of these 2 blacks. Just the bottom one I will use as a line in, and the top one out to the fan. So let's make these connections. Try to keep my hands out of the way for you. Get that green stranded wire tied into the 2 solid wires that are there. There you go, and again, tug test on that to make sure it's not going to pull out of that connection. Tighten that moret nice and tight. Tuck that ground into the box. Got nice deep plastic boxes here that we used in this house construction. Check that neutral splice, it's nice and tight. Poke it into the back of the box. So tuck that back into the box, make room for this fan body that's kind of large, fan control body. Make sure you got room in there, so you want to tuck those neutral and the ground wires back in there So you leave yourself lots of room. Just poke my little head in there to make sure. Okay, and then we will hook the hot wire to one of the fan control wires. Make sure they're nice and even. Spin that moret on till it's firm. And again, tug test on that wire, make sure it's not going to pull out. I say that a lot, but it's very important. And now the wire out to the fan itself. Black to the other black. Most important part about connecting a stranded wire to a solid wire, make sure they're out even at the ends, and make sure as you're tightening down that moret that you don't feel one of the two wires getting pulled up and the other one not. That means you're only biting with the little spring coil inside there. You're only grabbing one of those conductors. So it's nice and tight, about a turn and a half after you've tightened them here on the wires, and pull on both. They're in there solid. We'll tuck all this into the box. Put the box screws back in and the plate on, and we'll turn the power on and test our fan. Okay, now remember we didn't fully tighten those blade screws because we're going to get it up to full speed and try to make sure we don't have too much wobble on it. So this fan control, this particular fan control, the first switch position is number 1, which is high speed, and then they go from higher to lower speed. 1 is high, 2 medium, 3 medium low, and 4 low. So let's turn it on. Got the power restored. Let's see if it works, and we'll see how the balance is. A little bit of wobble as it's speeding up. Right now we're pretty much up to full speed. That fan moves a lot of air. That's going to be very effective in here. So I'm comfortable with the wobble. There's really no wobble there at all, so I'm going to shut it back off. And I'm going to tighten down the blade screws, the machine screws that I put in, and I'm even going to check the ones that were on the other side of the bracket just to make sure it's all tight. Well, there you have it, the complete installation of a Westinghouse industrial style ceiling fan with an extended 1 meter down rod. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel, and click on that little bell. That way you're going to be the first to know when I release a new video. Thanks again for watching. I'm Terry Peterman, the Internet Electrician.